welcome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So we are talking about mental health, which is a massive topic today, and your beautiful organisation, Stronger Than Stigma. So I am so excited to dive into this topic with you and explore it with you and really breaking the stigma. And that's where I think I love the idea of what you've created and founded and moving forward with. So I want to start first by what does Stronger Than Stigma mean to you? Where did that name come from?
Sure. So as somebody who personally struggles with anxiety and depression and whose first experience happened, in my young life, I was 17, I was a junior in high school. It really threw me for a loop and just opened my eyes to something that I wasn't even aware of. Because they don't educate you in school about mental health or signs and symptoms or whatnot. So when something is just off, you have no idea where to turn. And to that point, it was the most isolating experience that I had ever gone through. I'm an only child, and my parents are amazing and helped me get the professional help that I needed. But it was treated like a family secret, and they did that to protect me. A doctor had at one time said, oh, it might just be a phase. She might grow out of it, whatever. So to protect my privacy and my story and how I was going to move through the world after the episode had passed, it was isolating, and it was this very scary time in my life. And so I said to myself, I always said, if I live through this, I have to make sure that nobody else feels the way that I do. And that's the core, mission that really sets my heart on fire, is it's my purpose to make sure that nobody has an isolating experience like that. And so I will break down any wall or any barrier for anybody else coming behind me or, alongside me, because I know what that pain feels like firsthand. And it's so unnecessary because so many people struggle, and you're not the only one. And that's the guiding message of Stronger Than Stigma. It's like, we are stronger than whatever box people want to put us into. While we might be shaped by our experiences, they make us stronger. That's how we build resilience. And, there's a lot of good that can come out of struggle, such as one with your mental health and dealing with something difficult that you've overcome. So yes, Stronger Than Stigma to me means, I've been there and I want to help people through it, but also we've got an obstacle and a hurdle that we all need to jump, and we're the movement that really wants to conquer that.
Yeah, and I think it's so necessary. And like you say, it's experienced on multiple different levels with so many people, on a daily basis, and they may not even recognize what that is or what that we're not taught what those symptoms are as such. I hate to say symptoms, but those feelings behind what this is it just because something's happened, or is it because I'm actually feeling this way? Is there something wrong with me? Is there all these questions that, like you say, creates this isolation, and it really is not necessary, where there's support and there's binding together and there's community, and so we can actually give the necessary means for people to feel supported. And that's what I love about what you're doing. So
yeah. Thank you so much.
From my perspective, I deal with the physical health of the body a lot, so the physiology. Mental health always comes into it though, and I find there's a huge link, and it's just a book I'm reading at the moment, Letting Go, and that really, and I believe it so heartedly, and even aspects of Louise Hay, when you have emotions bringing back into the body, you've got these physical signs and symptoms from dealing with certain emotions, a suppression of emotions, And I really like the idea of that, because I see a lot of this come through physical ailments in certain areas that are unheard or feeling unheard, which is in the throat. So there's certain, you know, parts of the body that the emotions then become stuck or stagnate. And that's, for me, fascinating. But there's not enough emphasis on how to deal with that, or how to get through that, or how to cope with that and be supported. So we'll talk through all of that today, which is exciting.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And it's wild too. You know, you see a lot of pro mental health messaging out there right now that's like, you know, mental health is just as important as physical health, blah blah blah. And you know, I appreciate it, but at the same time, you know, I once heard a doctor speak at one of our events, and he just nailed it so perfectly, because he's like, your brain is an organ, thus your mental health is physical health. So it's not just as important, it is equally important. It is the same exact thing.
Yes.
And you know, yeah, so, and the fact that we as a society you know, have okayed any other organ or body part getting hurt or being sick, and yet your mind and your brain cannot, is a terrible double standard that keeps a lot of people quiet and in pain in a way that they wouldn't be should they trip and fall and have a broken leg. They wouldn't, you know, keep that to themselves. They would reach out and get the help that they needed.
Exactly. And it's because it's unseen, isn't it? It's not like it's measurable. Yes, if you dive deep into it and you measure the neurotransmitters, and if you measure other certain things, and if you do scans, and if you do all this sort of stuff, but other than that, it's not an obvious broken leg. It's not an obvious, you know, cut on or an infection. It's really something unseen. So a lot of people it's out of sight, out of mind.
Totally. And I think also, you know, that people, well, that's funny. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I think that because people can't see it, they invalidate it, you know, and I see this a lot. We do a lot of work in like multicultural communities and, you know, veteran communities where there's a history of, you know, just toughing your way through it and not attending to behavioral, mental, emotional well-being. It's just, you know, considered weakness if you're talking about your feelings. So they suppress things and they do not reach out for help unless really given the opportunity to feel safe. And it's bizarre because of the fact that you can hide it so well. And so, you know, parents might say to children, there's nothing wrong with you, because they can't see a bleeding wound. Exactly. And yet, you know, your child knows that they're struggling. They might not have the words to describe it, because again, we're not taught in school. And I think it's so weird too. You know, I've done work in my own therapy, and I remember getting teased by a therapist because we were supposed to use, she wanted me to use feeling words and like feeling statements. So saying like, I'm disappointed that blah, blah happened, or I'm angry that whatever happened. And the way that I was speaking was I would go like, I feel like something, you know, I might be upset, whatever it was. And she teased me because she's like, just because you say the word, you know, feel doesn't mean that it's a feeling word. And we would laugh about it. But it's so weird because, you know, in doing that, she realized that I had a problem like using feeling words. Like maybe I wasn't sure I could describe, and, you know, I had language to talk about or anecdotes to talk about how I was feeling. And then she could draw out like, oh, disappointment, anger, whatever, sadness. But like to add to my toolbox, she gave me a list of, you know, descriptive feeling words. And I remember reading through it and being like, this doesn't even sum it up. Like some of the feelings were not listed on that page. They were too complicated or too complex to kind of just like pick one and be like, oh, I am happy. You know, it's like, it was eye-opening for me then too, because it was like, we're really, if this is what you do to tell a child, like, speak to me with one of these words, and then you're training them, it's a very limited vocabulary. So we
Absolutely.
really don't even have the vocabulary to express how we feel, which is a real shame.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's these heart feelings too, because I look at a lot of heart math stuff, and looking into the breathing and the heart rhythms, which I find fascinating in itself. But you can't, again, vocabularize the feelings that come from that connection, or those connections, or the feeling you get within your body when you're working through some of those things. Like, there are no words for that, because it's beyond words. And I totally get what you're saying there, because we can't really grasp completely what we're feeling in words, because words are so limited. Very limited. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So well, I just want to step back a little bit. How did Stronger Than Stigma come about right at the start? I know you've spoken through, the initial part of what the Stronger Than Stigma means to you, and a little bit of your history. But what was the point where you went, right, this needs to happen, I'm starting an organization, let's go?
Sure. So let's see. I first struggled when I was 17, high school, very isolating. I didn't start owning my story until I was on my own at college. And at that point, I guess I was coming into my own. I was deciding, what was going to be part of my story, what I was, proud of, what I was ashamed of, whatever. And they had anxiety and depression support groups on campus, and it was, facilitated by the Disability Resource Center. So even, calling something that, I don't think people are going to walk through those doors, right?
Yeah.
So very stigmatizing. But I had a connection with the dean at preview, and he said, please just give us a chance. Come to this school. We've really put a lot of resources behind this facility, and, there's all these support groups and whatnot. So I went, and that was the first time, in my life and in my struggles, that I had an opportunity to sit across from people my own age, in my own, realm of life experience, who, looked like me and were cool and were the kind of people that I would want to be friends with, who had also struggled and been down the same path. I had never been able to compare notes with anybody before. And so for me, it was life-changing, because I was finally able to feel the feeling of not being alone. Doctors and therapists had told me, you're one-on-one when you're in treatment like that. And so I had been told, you're not alone. 1 in 4 people struggle with this. That's, X amount of millions of people in the United States, and, even more than that globally. But those numbers don't mean anything if you can't be like, oh, it's Pete and Kelly down the street, then that means something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that feeling was just so empowering to me. And I joke that I became like the unofficial ambassador of the support groups. Because, anytime I met somebody in class and they opened up and they shared, I was like, you got to come with me. This is great. Like, you'll feel so good after you come. And that was all well and good. My sophomore year, or I guess the end of my freshman year, though, there was a very public suicide on our campus. And for whatever, I don't know why it happened that night, but I just so happened to be walking by with a friend of mine. I didn't see it happen, but I was there for like the aftermath, and there were, police sirens, and it was an awful sight. And I remember talking to a police officer and asking him, what happened? Like, are we safe to keep walking? Because a friend and I were going to pick up her car. And he's like, no, you're safe. You're fine. I can't tell you what happened. You'll read about it on the front page of the paper tomorrow. And I just remember getting goosebumps, just knowing what had happened. Not like it was obviously something that I didn't. I just knew. It was one of those moments where I was like, oh goodness, like, wow, I can't believe that that's what just happened here. And then it turned from shock into anger, because I didn't know the student. And I was really mad that I didn't know the student, because I was like, why wasn't he in the support groups with me? Did he not know that there were free resources available to him on campus? Or was he too ashamed and embarrassed to reach out for help? And all of those things centered around stigma. And I was angry enough basically to do something about it. I'm like, the campus let us down because this shouldn't have happened. And the only good that can come of this is that we can keep other people alive by telling them it doesn't have to get to this point. There's a chance for you, and we're here to help, and people do heal. And so I pitched just like a campus-wide campaign to the dean. And he loved it, but he wasn't able to back it just, for whatever reason, resources on campus or whatever. And I remember him saying to me, keep this in your back pocket, but for right now, like, join something pre-existing and make change from the inside. And those words were kind of like burned in my brain, because it was a no, and the system wasn't working. And I did I was a good student. I was a good girl. I did what he asked of me. I tried to run for a disability seat in the, student government body. But I wasn't elected, and I wasn't just going to sit by and let this terrible thing happen to somebody else. And I got very serious about business plans, and I knew that I didn't know about starting a nonprofit. I just knew, if you want to do good for the world, you start a nonprofit. Like, I knew very basic things. And so I started signing up for seminars, and, I declared a minor in nonprofit leadership, and everything in my education started like shaping this like entity. And I, on like, after I had finished my schoolwork and on weekends, I was registering, a not-for-profit corporation in the state of Florida, and I was applying for, tax exemption status, and I was just so passionate, and I had one of those like the train cannot be stopped kind of motivations and momentum behind it, that that's where we started. So we were college students. This was right before my 21st birthday, and we've been at it now. It'll be 8 years in August.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Wow, 8 years. Holy moly. I don't know where to start with picking apart all that. I've been taken through. Right. Oh my goodness. Well,
I've learned a lot along the way.
Oh, absolutely. And I, just from personal experience, starting a nonprofit here, it's very different. You learn a lot as you go along. There's nowhere else to really learn it from other than doing it. So, wow.
So true.
Now, first of all, there's so much to that. I've got a few questions that I wanted to ask. So, how, at the moment, like, give me a bit of an example of how the organisation runs, and we'll sort of go from there. Where are the sort of key action points that you look at? Where are you running certain things? How are you getting people in? All that sort of stuff. Like, I guess it comes from, how are you making in your organisation now, in Stronger Than Stigma, the changes that you foresee making that ripple effect across the world?
Sure. So it's kind of funny, but the organization aged along with us. As we, graduated college, we recognize that things don't, get better when you're off a college campus. Like, and in fact, as a young professional, a lot of times you're moving to a new place, you don't have friends there, you can't really talk about these issues in the workplace. You have to navigate insurance. There's no like free counseling center. The barriers kind of stack up against you, even worse. And so we started to really, allow our focus to shift on into that transitional period. Like, what is it like to go from being a student to entering the real world, and how can we bridge that gap? So we still have a student organization that's, I guess it's going to be in its 8th generation of student leadership now come August. And that's at the University of Florida in Gainesville, because that's where we started. But headquarters shifted to Jacksonville when I, moved home to run the operation. And we really just doubled down on how do we serve the young professional community of Jacksonville? And, the answer was we create community so that people can meet like-minded people, and, we organize events, and we don't try and do, your average dry seminar panel discussion. We're trying to really engage. We're trying to make things fun to the point where somebody who might not have identified with the topic of mental health will come because the event sounds like fun. So, our tone is we lead with humor and irreverence. We're all about, like, we've been there, we've done that, let's laugh about it. And so one of our really cool programs was we launched a comedy tour in the fall of 2018. And we, a professional comedian out of LA that I know from college, agreed to go on the road with me. And we did, 12 shows in 6 states in 25 days. So it was just like one thing after the next. Yeah, it was really cool. And we called it the Nobody's Happy Comedy Tour. So, we were just like, the whole point is to reach people where they're at. And that's the truth. Nobody's happy all the time. So, that was
when I first saw all of your posts and everything, that really made my heart sing. That is your tone, that having fun. And I so, not sympathize, but I so value that, because I love to portray health in any shape or form with fun. And that really gives people a different spin on any condition, on any support, and I love it. I love that you did a comedy tour. It's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, listen, every public service announcement wants to scare you and shock you and tell you these awful statistics. And, that'll keep you up at night, and you already have anxiety or whatever it is that you're struggling with. Like, you don't need help.
You already got it. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need help not sleeping. That's a check that off the list. You have that skill. So we want to approach it from a completely different angle, and one where people can digest it and they can feel like they've found home with us. So everything we do, we try and innovate. Like our next big program was in 2019. We launched it's actually the first ever pop-up shop around mental health awareness. So it was called The Living Room, and it was part interactive art installation, part performance venue, and part literal living room with couches and chairs, so that people could be inspired by what was on the wall and then just sit down and chat. And it could be real talk over small talk, was what we said. And it was a transformational experience. Like, I cannot even put into words what I saw, unfold in that space, and how many stories, I was a witness to, because people just walked in and shared. They'd never had this opportunity where a space made them feel welcome and was beautiful, and they had a purpose to be there, and they had, smiling faces who, got it, they just understood them, and they got into it, and you started hearing people just open up in a way that was so beautiful. And we were just in the middle of downtown Jacksonville, so like in the heart of the city. And I wouldn't have traded that experience for the world. And it was so successful here that our dream is to scale it and take it to cities and countries, you know, around the world. It's very unique. And you know, we were planning to do round 2 in Jacksonville in 2020. And then obviously the pandemic struck and had other plans for us. So we completely pivoted to being online. And we launched a 31-day virtual event marathon last May for Mental Health Awareness Month. So every single day there was some sort of programming. And that's like how we ran the pop-up too. Because in that performance space, we were programming the heck out of it. So we couldn't gather like in the living room, but we could gather people in their own living rooms respectively. And that was our spin. But that allowed us to reach a global audience. And so, you know, overnight, essentially, like by the end of the month, we had touched 50,000 people globally, which was just like, holy cow. Yeah. But, and I bet now if we went back and counted video views a year later, it's got to be far larger than that. So the content lives and it's free and accessible. And we did that on purpose. We knew people were struggling and that the pandemic was, you know, and it's just an unprecedented, scary thing to be living through and coping with. And there's nobody's been through this before, unless they were around in the 1900s for the Spanish flu. Nobody's a pandemic expert. So we're all just feeling around in the dark and, you know, waiting for it to pass and a new sense of normal to emerge, but we don't know what that's going to be like. So
No.
You know.
And the online environment is brilliant and everything, you know, we're so lucky that we actually have that versus complete isolation with no internet and no, you know, online environments that we can build. But from that, how have you seen changes from the COVID environment, that's, you know, the pandemic, how has that changed what you've seen in people and mental health?
I've seen a dramatic increase in the number of people who now recognize that mental health is important and are willing to open up and share in a way that it just wasn't happening before. Like when we had the space, people could come in and become inspired and get into it, and you know, some magic would happen. But when we didn't have the space, you know, and then we were functioning in real life, the marketing for the event had to be strong enough to pull people in through the doors. You know, there was no storefront to just wander into. Like people had to intentionally come. And then online, because like social media seems to be ever present and that it's not going away, you kind of bump into us that way too. And there weren't so many mental health groups activating online in the way that we were last year, where it was just sheer quantity and quality. But you know, like day after day and different times to hit different time zones. So we were really saturating the market, and everything was accessible because it was free. So we ran into people who were just searching Eventbrite, looking for ways to connect. You know, they were sitting at home and twiddling their thumbs and trying to, you know, do their best to follow lockdown protocol, and they're scared out of their minds and they haven't seen their friends and family in weeks and months. And there we were. So it's been, honestly, when I stop to think about it, we still run a weekly, we call it an unmeetup. And so every week people can sign on, you know, Monday night from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern time, and just hang out in a space where nobody's going to judge them and they can share or not share, or we can talk about our favorite cereal. Like the conversation really flows, and it's a space where they can do that, you know, and it's so cool. Like we just had this, I keep forgetting today's Tuesday. So yesterday was Monday. We just had it yesterday. And again, we have a global audience, you know, we have friends now because they've come enough where it's like, they're our tribe. There are people. So, you know, we have somebody from Canada and then across the country in LA and Nebraska, and somebody will stay up really, really late and log in from London. We love her. You know, so just like all over the States. And, you know, the UK and whatever. I wish it was a good time for, well, I guess if people are morning people in Australia, they could join for sure. But
do a tour, a comedy tour here. That would be incredible.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Sign me up.
Wow, that I love also how because I find that the availability of people finding what they want or what they need is tricky, because again, there is a lot out there at the moment, but maybe not, you know, exactly what they're needing to see with the social medias, with this, you know, you can get really stuck down into the unhealthy, you know, aspects of social media. Then that saturation that you're putting out there, it's the only way to go, hello, you know, I'm here, this is what you need to be seeing, not all the other stuff, let's go. Because yeah, that's then fueling obviously the inner conflict of what they're experiencing already. So yeah, I think that's the only way to do it. And then obviously the tours and everything, amazing. It's just incredible what you're doing. I just wanted to come into a bit of a different side note here, because I just wanted to cover it for some of my audience. Now, I don't know, you know, tell me if you don't want to talk about this or if there is no knowledge on it, but it's very, you know, when you go to a doctor, a GP, or you go to a psychiatrist or you go to a psychologist and there is a mental health issue, medication is always the first, not first, but it's one of the steps that they use and take. Now, what's your opinion on medication and mental health? I would love to find out what you think.
Sure.
Yes.
So I'm not a clinician and I do not pretend to be, you know, somebody who's a professional in the sense of being able to treat and diagnose mental health issues. And sometimes it's funny because people will come to me and share their experience and then say, you know, well, what do you think? Like, what's wrong with me? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm a mental health advocate. I'm a mental health strategist. I'm an experience designer. Like, I have other titles that make me a professional in this space and that are my strengths, but I know that, you know, clinical is not one of them. That being said, being somebody who has sought treatment myself, and the way that I run Stronger Than Stigma is I do not care what helps you heal or live another day. I just need you to recognize that professional help is necessary. Yeah. So, you know, talking to me is great. I don't necessarily say to people like, oh, there's that Charlie Brown image that comes to mind where I forget if it's like Lucy, I forget who it is that sets up the lemonade stand that says like psychiatric help 5 cents. But I always think of that and I'm like, oh, I can't be that person because I'm not trained and it does drain me. So I have to protect my energy that way.
Absolutely.
But our philosophy is whatever it is that helps you should do. And the first step should be talking to somebody with that trained ear. I always send people to a therapist first because a lot of times you just need somebody who's listening, who's able to, you know, decode what you're thinking and feeling and kind of, you know, unravel that twisted yarn ball and kind of give it back to you and say like, hey, this is what I think you're struggling with. And then you can have an understanding and make a decision. And a lot of times, you know, therapists work in the field so long that they'll say to somebody, hey, you know, I'm happy to work with you on this, but I think that you should also go see a psychiatrist and maybe medicine would be a good route for you. But I leave that up to the discretion of that clinician because that's, you know, that's their job. And I think I think that, wonders can be done with just a simple, counselor, therapist patient relationship. And then I do think that there are life-saving pharmaceuticals out there, and I think that there's an added stigma in taking medicine because we've been told, oh, it's a happy pill, or, people who take meds are crazy, or whatever it is that we say. But, to counter that point, it's like, if you have diabetes, you take insulin. If you have a headache, you might take Motrin or ibuprofen, whatever. And it should be no different. And as somebody, who has struggled and gone through periods of time where, meditation and yoga and balanced diet and sleep and all of the things that I do to maintain wellness just weren't good enough, I have relied on pharmaceuticals, and they have gotten me through very tough periods of time that I couldn't have done it. I don't know. I think it's all part of like that magic potion that kind of gets all stirred up, and you never know, like, was it the long walk on the beach, or was it, the drug, or was it whatever, but I feel better now. And so I want that for everybody.
Yes.
And if it's, taking medicine or just talking to somebody, like whatever, or howling at the moon, I don't care. Like whatever it is that you need to do to feel better, I'm pro that.
Yeah, and I love that, and that's why I sort of wanted to ask your opinion on it, in a sense, where's the realm look like for you? Because there are a lot of people out there, like you said, there's a stigma, and I try as hard as I can to keep an open mind for as many things as possible. And with my experience, those medications can be that next step or that step over, that barrier change, where people feel like, I can actually now look after myself because I'm on a medication that helps support me go and do that. Without that, they weren't even able to step through that door and even be able to start looking after themselves and getting the proper sleep and going for the walks and going out in public and all these sorts of things that really create that community and wellness, like you say, across the whole body. So I totally agree with you. And there's many people who are against it, but I look at, why would you be against it? And it has to be a suitable medication, it has to be a suitable time, all those sorts of things have to be looked at, and other areas of the body and aspects of wellness. But I don't think we should, definitely that stigma needs to be removed from medications. And I'm so glad you said that. That's really, really fantastic. Yeah. And there's so much out there for people for coming now, especially through the US. I'm watching and waiting for something to be more pronounced here in terms of treatments with the psychedelic type drugs, and in looking at PTSD treatments, whether it's the injection and the nerve, and then you've got ketamine and all sorts of amazing different things happening all over the place with MAPS. And yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with that, and to help to support people with so many different aspects that they can choose to go, wow, that really, really, vibrates with me. I can go for that. So, and then the support. So I love you said, first into therapy, counselling, and a lot can be done in those spaces, and then the wider community. So, from this point, what else do you look at for people and recommend, and sort of what does the path look like? They make contact with you guys, they go through support networks and community and join with that. How long and how do you see those sorts of progressions happen with certain people?
It's interesting because there's not like a clear pathway, like we're not like a funnel to anything. No. And we're not a resource list either. So people tend to find us at different parts of their journey. Like I have seen, and definitely on campus, a lot of times we were people's first stop. Students were more willing to talk to their peers than they were to talk to an adult, you know, a faculty member, a professor or whatnot. And even though the professors would say, you know, we're here for you, let us know, it's not, you know, an adult friendly atmosphere. It's really student centric. It's all about, you know, growing, just getting rid of the training wheels and kind of, you know, figuring things out for yourself. And so Stronger Than Stigma's role was kind of like being that, almost that guide on the path to wellness, because it was like safe for them to walk through the door and say, hey, I haven't been feeling like myself in a long time and I don't know where to turn. And, you know, I've seen you guys table at different events and, you know, where do I go? And then it was sometimes as simple as saying like, hey, here's the number of the counseling center, like make an appointment and talk to somebody. And then, you know, I had personal experiences where I would walk people there, you know, and I don't do that as much now from headquarters in Jacksonville and working with young professionals and whatnot, because I don't know what their insurance situation is like. And it's very difficult to find like non-crisis like help for free, at least in Jacksonville. So like there are places you can go if you are like suicidal, you know, a danger to yourself or others or whatnot, and that's available to you. But if you're just somebody who is recognizing like, hey, I need to reach out, I don't feel like myself, I'm not, something's wrong, that's not where I would send you. I wouldn't send a friend to those spaces. It could be traumatic. And I wish that there were better options to be like, hey, go through these doors and there will be friendly faces there to greet you. But just the way the American system works, it's not always the case. So, you know, we really focus on being that social support system. You know, we don't do formalized support groups because we're not run by clinicians, but we are there to provide community, and that's the void that we fill, because traditionally you have, you know, medical treatment where you're seeing your providers, and then you'll hear about advocacy work in terms of politics where people are pushing through, you know, legislation to help make sure that people are able to get treatment. But then there's this gap of like, where do people hang out when they have a mental health issue and they just want to talk about it with somebody who isn't going to judge them for it and can be a friend. And that's the space that we're in.
Yeah. Wow. So firstly, I want to ask you, what is on your journey now, you know, the 8 years plus, I would say, of going through all of this, what's been the biggest challenge that you've come across?
It's hard to say. I guess, okay, so funding has always been an issue.
Yeah.
And I would say that that's probably the beast number one, that I'm constantly just trying to slay. Like, you know, and I, as the CEO, like that's my job, to bring revenue in and make sure that we're able to function and whatnot. And so that's what keeps me up at night. At the same time, I think a contributing factor to that was the fact that I was 20 when I signed those papers and became, you know, a nonprofit leader. And I don't think that people want to give money to children. You know, I don't think that they, I think that, I think it's always better to be underestimated, because then I can, you know, prove you wrong and be like, oh, you don't want to give me money? Well, watch what I can do for free, you know? But at the same time, I think that has undercut us a little bit, where people in prominent positions that would be able to donate sizable amounts of money and really help us grow are very impressed by what we can do in a grassroots nature. And so maybe they feel like they don't have to give because we will still continue, I will blood, sweat, and tear it all the way to the finish line.
Yeah.
So funding is, I would definitely say, has been the biggest obstacle. And I don't know, if the age factor plays into that, or maybe it's my relationship to the age thing. If I approached things as like I'm just a wee college student. I don't know. I don't know if it was me feeling insecure about being young, but I'm not as young anymore, and I'm still having the same problems. And 8 years in, I'm able to say now, no, unless you have a budget, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. This issue is too important. And our work and being able to continue to do the work means valuing it. And that translates to the energy around money. And it's very uncomfortable for me to say that, because I believe in this work wholeheartedly, and I never want to say no to anybody. But it's hard. It's definitely hard.
I think that it's a common thread between a lot of nonprofits and people and businesses, and that aspect of money and how money, you need money, you want to do good, and being a business person means that you have to make sacrifices and all sorts of different things surrounding that, but sometimes that can really take away with how we want to help people. And that I find also very tricky. I'm not a businesswoman. I'm in this to help people. If I could just hit the ground running and do that and everyone else would take after the money, that would be fantastic. But it's just the way it is. And you have to really put on all these different hats to help support what your passion is and what you really want to do. And money is such a major component for that. So, yeah, I think also it's our belief systems, and like you say, it's breaking through those and learning how to break through those. And I myself are still learning, I can tell you that. I think we all are trying to break through some sort of aspect of ourselves that's blocking certain things. So yeah, it's really interesting to see, but I completely understand that as well. Funding's a huge thing for you and all of your team to keep going. Yeah.
Definitely.
I think you're going to just soar, but that's me personally.
I appreciate it. I'll take all the thoughts and prayers. All the good vibes.
I think from my perspective, if you're doing good work and you're doing supportive work and you're helping people, how can you not be supported everywhere else in the world, and unless you're blocking something? That's my perspective on things. So you just keep doing good and keep unblocking your blocks and just keep working through it and maintaining your own wellness, and things just come. So amazing. I want to just almost not finish up, but I want to just touch base now on, if you want to give a personal perspective on this as well, what are the things that have to be included daily in your life for mental health? And this can be you personally, or what you've seen work really well for other people. And I know Stronger Than Stigma is this community beautiful based support network, and that obviously would be a big part of it. But is there anything else that is really important, you feel, for daily mental health support?
I think the number one most important thing is having social support. I really do. And obviously I'd love to be part of that for you in terms of providing community through Stronger Than Stigma, whether it be online and virtually or in person. But beyond that, I think that knowing that you have a listening ear somewhere in your circle, whether it's a friend or a family member, somebody that you can turn to when, things aren't all fine and dandy, and that, will just listen to you. Because a lot of times I think that people, they think that they have to fix things. They think that if somebody comes to them and says, I'm really struggling with XYZ, that they have to say, oh, well, in order to solve XYZ, do this. And a lot of times it's not that. It's just, active listening, staying there silently, intently listening to what that person is saying, and letting them air it, so that they're not bottling it up, and that it's not being repressed, and it's not being turned into whatever negative energy can cause other ailments. So I just think that more than anything, knowing that you can turn to somebody, and identifying that person in your head too, so that it's not like waiting till the last minute when it's the last straw, knowing that that person is who you would call. And whether it's the same person you share great happy news with, that would be great. But identifying somebody who can handle the hard stuff, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to check in every day, but I think knowing, deep down in your core that you have that person is the most important thing you can do for your mental health. And that person serves a huge role because they know you well, and they'll be able to tell you, like, hey, something's wrong, you're right, like, let's go together and see what we can do. Or I'm going to support you every step of the way, whatever it may be. And then beyond that, I think that your general wellness tips, getting enough sleep for your body, making sure you're eating the colors of the rainbow, as my dietitian friend says, and eating as healthfully and balanced as you can, and getting out in the sunshine, and moving your body. It's all important. I know it's stereotypical advice for somebody to say, like, oh, just be healthy and you'll be happy. But at the same time, I think that I know that all of these systems are connected. Yeah. And it's like a meme I saw once last year. It's like, make sure to hydrate and get enough sunlight, because you're basically a house plant with more complicated emotions. But it's like so true.
So true. And I think it's repeated so much is because it is the basis of what we need, all those things, but we don't get them. And it's just weird that we don't recognize the basic needs of a human: community, right, food, sunlight, water. It's just...
Yeah,
it baffles me on a daily basis, where I think, we just need to concentrate on those things, and most of them are free. It's not that hard to get some sunshine, unless you live in Antarctica or places that don't have sun, but most places have a fair bit of sun, so right, water and food, and you can always access, depending on where you are economically, but some form of good food. So yeah, I agree with all of that. Now, for people wanting to find you and what you're doing, what's the best way, and what have you got looking forwards? What have you got coming up? Any big events? Anything? Even a couple of years down the track, what are your big dreams and plans? What have we got to look forward to?
Sure. So I would say, if you would like to connect with me, I would love that. Social media is the best way to find us. Our handle is at Stronger Than Stigma on Instagram and Facebook. And then on Twitter, it's at STS_together. I will tell you that we're not the best tweet people, tweet users. Yeah, so follow it if you want, but I highly recommend the other places. And you can message us through there, or our website is a great way to learn more. Obviously, donations are always appreciated, and there's a link to do that from our website. So thank you in advance if you're listening and you're inspired to help out. And down the road, I have high hopes that we'll be traveling, around the world to bring the living room pop-up to life, and continuing on with our comedy tours and everything, once we can travel again safely and really like convene people. So definitely look out for that. And if you're someone who wants to bring it to, wherever you live, then I'd love to talk to you, and that would be awesome. In terms of what we have coming down the pike right now, I'm very excited to announce that we are inaugural partners on MTV's mental health campaign
Ooh,
for,
wow.
yes, for Mental Health Action Day on May 20th. Thank you. Yes. So along with like, oh man, 200 brands and nonprofits, we're all activating in some way, shape, or form. It's our tradition to be very active during the whole month of May for Mental Health Awareness Month. So we're planning a couple of different virtual events. If you follow us on socials and keep updated on our website, you'll know like when to tune in. And then at the end of the month, we're planning a socially distanced concert and conversation event where a couple of local musicians in Jacksonville will be playing, and then we'll be interviewed by one of our local radio DJs in town about the mental health aspect and the inspiration behind their music. So we're looking forward to some fun action in May for sure.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I forgot May is just around the corner.
It's wild. I don't know how that happened.
No, I know. Oh, well, the best of luck, and and so many amazing best wishes and positive vibes towards everything that you've got going on in the next few months. And I really appreciate your time today, Gabrielle. Thank you so much for coming on. I really think even another follow-up to this would be fantastic, and to see where you've headed in within a year would be amazing, because I'm sure there's going to be so much growth within that time as well for you and Stronger Than Stigma. So I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.
Wonderful. We'll see you soon.
Sounds good.